So what do we have here in front of us right now?
So in front of me, I've got 6 pairs of Air Jordans, 2 pairs of the band ones alongside the band letters. They're sort of the perfect props to bring the shoes to life. These Air Jordan 1s released on June 1st, 2010. And actually, the day that they released, I was banned from Nike, ironically. They sold at the outlet stores, and they were $109.99, even though the retail was $125. The shoes are all marked B grades. I always thought that it was because of the crinkled leather on them, but a lot of people have suggested that maybe it's because of the date on the inner collar, which is the date of the NBA's letter to Nike saying that Michael Jordan's black and red shoes violated an NBA policy. So this date is 1985, but the letter was dated 1984. So for whatever reason, these shoes were marked B grades and sent to the outlets.
Okay. And how much are the band ones worth these days?
They're going for about $1,000.
About $1,000.
Which is nuts for a B grade shoe that came out just a few years ago. In between these shoes is a pair of game worn and autographed Air Jordan 1s. You can see the autograph right here.
So Michael Jordan wore these right when they got released?
These are game worn and signed Air Jordan 1s from back in the day. They're dated 1985 on here. So these Air Jordan 1s have a great story. I bought them off of eBay, and when the auction was ending, I was on an airplane. And I use a program called eSnipe to win auctions for me when I'm not at the computer. On eSnipe, you can go in, enter an item number, how much you're willing to pay, and it'll place the bid for you at the last second. My flight was landing just at the time when this auction was ending, and I already had my eSnipe thing on auto bid or whatever. And as the plane's descending, I've got my phone and I'm like refreshing it and trying to like get that little bit of coverage to let me know that I won the auction. And sure enough, I got those emails from eBay saying, congratulations, you won. And I practically sprung up out of my airplane seat while the plane was landing.
And how much did those cost?
They were just over $5,000.
Okay.
Great deal.
Like how much are those worth right now?
I'd say they're worth at least $20,000.
$20,000. That's what's up. And how do you know, like for example, that it really is a Michael Jordan signed shoe? Is there like a certificate or is there authentication or something like that?
These shoes came with a Mirror's certificate of authenticity, but before I paid for them, I actually reached out to Nike. When Nike was paying my rent, they sent a bunch of executives and designers and employees to come by on tours. And they sent people that work at DNA. DNA is the Department of Nike Archives. Okay. So I met the people that work in the ultimate Nike vault. Okay. And I called them and I was like, hey, I just won these game-worn Air Jordan 1s on eBay. Would you mind looking at the listing and look at the pictures and look at the signature, and can you verify that this is what it says it is? And they got back to me about an hour later. It was really nice of them to even take the trouble to do it. And they said that they compared the pictures and the signature with about a dozen different pairs that they had in their vault, and that everything was spot on. One shoe's a 13, another shoe's a 13 and a half, which is something that Michael Jordan did. So that further helps authenticate them.
He wore mismatched sizes.
Yes. You know, so to think that somebody would break out 2 separate pairs from 1985, a 13 and a half and a 13, and mismade them and then scribble Michael Jordan's signature in there, it seems pretty far-fetched. So beyond the Mirror certification, once I got the shoes in hand, I actually sent them off to PSA DNA for another certificate of authenticity just for the signature itself.
So what do we have on the table here?
So my all-time favorite pair of Air Jordans are the black and red Air Jordan 11s. Okay. It's actually the first pair of Air Jordans that I ever had back in '96. I was in college. My parents were giving me a little bit of money to get by and live in college, and I took that money and bought my first Jordans.
Okay.
In front of me, I've got 3 pairs of black and red Air Jordan 11s. The pair on the right was game worn by Michael Jordan, and they're low-top PEs. Okay. This pair's never been released to the public.
So these are game worn by Michael Jordan himself.
So when I unveiled the Shoezeum in San Diego, it made the newspaper. It was on the front cover of the San Diego Union Tribune, and Judd Bushler's father reached out to me. Judd Bushler played with Michael Jordan during the second three-peat. So he has 3 rings with MJ, including the '96 season, which was the Bulls' best season ever in the history of the NBA. So Judd Bushler's dad reaches out to me, and he says, hey, I just read a story about you and your shoe museum. I'd love to come and check it out, by the way, my son played basketball with Michael Jordan, and Michael gave my son a pair of shoes, and they've been sitting in the garage for about 15 years. I'd love to give them to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you have a pair of Michael Jordan's shoes in the garage and you want to give them to me? He goes, yeah, I want to give them to you in exchange for a tour.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, like when can you be here? And he said, tomorrow. So the next morning I met him at my warehouse, and I had no idea what the shoes were that he had. And I wasn't about to ask, like,
Right.
that would be so like inappropriate. Like, oh, can you describe them to me?
Yeah.
Whatever they were, it was going to be good enough. And it was just such a nice gesture. And he shows up at my warehouse and he's got these in his hand and he's like, here you go. And I looked at the shoes and he had no idea that it was my all-time favorite pair of Air Jordans and one that was only made for Michael. I just about lost it.
Okay.
And he gave them to me.
So how much are those worth these days?
I couldn't even say.
Roughly.
15,000, 20,000.
Okay. 15, 20,000. Now what do we have here in the middle and on the left?
So these pairs are very, very special to me. My wife and I got married on 11/11, and so I thought it would be appropriate for us to each have our own pair of 11s. And I had this idea to reach out to Tinker Hatfield, who I've become really good friends with actually since he originally visited the Shoezeum. We email back and forth all the time. I had a really nice meeting with him in his office last December. But I reached out to him a few months before our wedding, and I was like, hey, we're getting married on 11/11, and I want to wear 11s. Would you consider customizing a pair of 11s for me and a pair for my wife? And he said, sure, that sounds great. So I sent him a follow-up email that basically told him our story, how we met, where we met, what my wife loves, what I love.
Okay.
And I sent him these two shoes, and he basically drew our story on the shoes. Just so special. Like, my wife loves turtles, so he drew a little turtle. We got engaged at the Bellagio, so he drew the Bellagio. We drove out to Disney World in Orlando. He drew Disney World, like the Magic Kingdom. And the details on the drawings are amazing. Like the Bellagio has the fireworks and the waterfalls.
Yep. And for those that don't know, Tinker Hatfield was the one that designed all the major Air Jordan releases that everyone's in love with.
Tinker Hatfield was an architect by trade, and he was a runner under Bill Bowerman. He started working at Nike in the early 1980s, 1981, I believe, and about 4 or 5 years in, he got into shoes. And he has since become the greatest sneaker designer of all time. He's responsible for the Air Jordan 3 through 15, the 20, the 23, some of the later models he still works on, the Air Max 1, the Air Trainer 1, the Air Safari, the Air Revolution, the Air Huarache. I mean,
So
Nike wouldn't be Nike without Tinker Hatfield.
So when people say that they don't check for Jordans after the 13, they're talking about when Tinker Hatfield left.
Well, he did do the 14 and the 15.
Oh, he did.
But yeah, the 16, 17, 18, 19, he didn't have any part of it. Actually, funny story. So when the original Nike executives showed up at my door, I mean, we're talking Mark Parker and Tinker Hatfield, and like these are people that I knew by face. They didn't have to introduce themselves to me. But when they were paying my rent and sending other people to visit, I didn't know all of these people so well. So I would entertain groups of Nike executives and designers, 10 or 12 at a time, and they would always like fixate on one shoe or two shoes, whatever it is that they fell in love with. And this guy, Wilson Smith, is over in the Air Jordan 16s and 17s, and he's just looking at them like they're the most amazing shoes ever made. Lo and behold, he was the designer of them. And what he was so mesmerized by is that I was taking their inspirations and bringing them to life. Like the 17 has a golf course on the outsole and is inspired by jazz music. So I had all sorts of like golf and jazz props, and he was just looking at these shoes like, man, it's just so amazing that you went so deep in your research that all of your displays are actually hitting on the inspirations. But it was funny because I remember seeing this guy looking at the 16s and 17s, and he just like walked past all of the Jordans that everyone else loves, and then it all made sense because he was the designer.
Jada Kiss, man. That dude is old school dude, you know, OG in the game. So he got stuff for years that you haven't even seen.
My favorite sneaker, the all black sixes, the original jump off from the championship and shit like that. Those are my favorite releases. But I got a pair that I didn't have for so long that I play ball with them still sometimes. I wear them out. They twisted, but they from the first era of them, so you know.